Kick it off. Thank you, everybody, for attending our impact fee presentation. We've brought Denise Stiffarm with us. She's from Pacifica Law. She has worked as our consultant on establishing impact fees, making sure we're following the rules and laws, doing the calculations correctly for quite a long time. I was commenting to somebody earlier today, we were working with Grace Yuan, and I think that was 5, 6, 7 years ago, and ever since she went to Pacifica, we worked with Denise. So appreciate all of your guidance and leadership in this area, Denise. It's complicated, and I think what I want to accomplish tonight is answering any and all questions that we might have and laying out how the process works, because it's something that we've worked a lot on over the years to make sure we were maximizing what we can do and making sure we were timely in being able to do it. And so with us is Dan Ballard, Director of Finance, who does all of the collecting of the fees and the logging them in and all that stuff, and Charlie Weaver, who plays a key role in helping us put together the capital facilities plan that plays a role that Denise will talk about in collecting impact fees. And we couldn't do this without Cassie. We would be helpless and useless. So really appreciate all that she does for us. So thank you. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Denise, and we'll go from there.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And thank you for inviting me to participate tonight. I am going to share my screen, which is always the most challenging part of a presentation for me. So let me know if you do see that. You got it?
Got
okay,
it.
Great. Wonderful. So again, I am Denise Stiffarm, a partner at Pacifica Law Group. And as just some general background to add, I work with school districts throughout the state of Washington on a variety of matters, but one area that I do work quite frequently with school districts on is capital facilities planning and school impact fees. So my goal tonight really is to provide an overview of what school impact fees are, including the underlying authority and the general rules, how a school district establishes eligibility to request fees, and how fees are calculated. And we'll also look at and talk about some things that are unique to the Sultan School District and how that compares to some of the neighboring districts. But one thing you'll hear me repeat more than once tonight is that there really is no apples to apples comparison from one school district's impact fees to another school district's fees. And that is because, as I hope you'll see when we walk through this presentation, district-specific circumstances and factors really do control the end fee. So starting out, what is an impact fee? The Growth Management Act provides authority for local jurisdictions to assess a one-time charge on new development. And it's intended to be a mechanism where growth pays for growth to help fund needed or expanded public facilities reasonably related to new development. Impact fees by law must reflect a proportionate share, that's straight from the statute, of the costs of the capacity needed to serve new development. And so by design and intention, impact fees are one size fits all. And that is an important thing to keep in mind, because it really means that when you are determining an impact fee, you're doing it with the intent that it will apply and be legally applicable to all new development within the boundaries that it's being assessed. This is actually an improvement over the previous authority prior to the Growth Management Act, where cities, counties, school districts had to look at new development on a case-by-case basis and calculate fees individually. There were also some other limitations involved, and this really was time-consuming and a pretty unpredictable process. Final, what is an impact fee for specific to school impact fees is that they are only charged on new residential development, because that is where the impact comes from. Traffic impact fees, park impact fees, fire impact fees are also out there in the universe of impact fees, and those often are assessed on commercial development. But for commercial projects, you're not seeing kids residing within those units, so they are not charged school impact fees. There are bright line rules in place that guide the calculation, the assessment, and the use of impact fees generally. One thing to keep in mind is that school districts are not independently able to assess and collect impact fees. There's no state authority that provides for that. Rather, school districts need to rely upon their cities and their counties to adopt an ordinance and collect fees on behalf of the school district. In order to do that, the school district needs to present a capital facilities plan that identifies their growth-related needs and includes a fee. That capital facilities plan is then adopted by reference in the local jurisdiction's comprehensive plan to provide the documentation supporting that fee. A third important rule is that impact fees can only be used for capital projects that are related to increased growth needs for a school. Of course, that is, do you need new seats in a classroom to serve anticipated new growth? Importantly, impact fees cannot be used for general operations costs, and they can't be used for capital needs that are unrelated to growth. So what is called existing deficiencies, if there were pre-existing seats needed to serve the existing community, those aren't impact fee eligible costs. And another example would be a modernization project. If there's no added capacity, that modernization is an existing deficiency where impact fees would not be an eligible funding source. Fourth rule is that impact fees must be expended or encumbered within 10 years of collection. And then they can only be spent on growth-related projects identified in an adopted capital facilities plan. And finally, very importantly, impact fees by law cannot be the sole source of funding of a capital improvement. They can be one of the sources, but there also needs to be other funding available for purposes of the project. Often this can be state-related funds, but more often than not, it is local funding. And this is true for all impact fees, whether they are school impact fees, traffic impact fees, fire impact fees, or park impact fees. There's also, by nature of the fee authority, a baseline eligibility that a school district needs to demonstrate before it can even go to its city or its county to request the assessment of school impact fees. And there essentially are three prongs that a district needs to demonstrate. The first is that they are projecting enrollment growth over a forward-looking, at least 6-year planning period. So we do a capital facilities plan, we plan out at least 6 years, and we look for patterns that indicate new growth, new students coming into the district. The second prong is that they need to show that with that new growth, they need to have new seats to serve that new growth. So an identified capacity need at the grade span where the growth is occurring. And then finally, once those two prongs are met, there's a third prong that requires that the district have planned construction to provide that needed new capacity with a reasonable expectation to be able to fully fund and bring that project online within the 6-year period. And again, I just want to emphasize here that reasonable expectation of funding must include sources beyond just impact fees. Turning to the actual calculation, if you've ever looked at the district's capital facilities plan, you've seen the spreadsheet in that plan that looks very complicated, but generates an end result fee. And I'm going to try to break that down a little bit to simplify it, but starting with just the general rules involved with that. The formula that drives that fee calculation is based on state law and the parameters that dictate that the impact fee must reflect a proportionate share of the new housing unit's impact. So we're getting that one size fits all, but it must be a proportionate share of what, in terms of new students, that new house will generate and how that affects the district's capacity needs. In order to do that, the common technique is to use what's called a student generation rate to measure the impact of the average number of new students generated by each new home built within the district. We do a different look for single family homes versus multifamily homes because the demographics are different. And we want, of course, to be able to be legally sound with our proportionate share impact. And so this student generation rate looks at the actual student enrollment addresses from new building permits that have been recently built within the boundaries of the district. So both the cities and the county. So anywhere within district boundaries, if there was a new home built, we're going to match that with a student address to get an idea of how many new students new development is generating. Once we apply that to determine what that per dwelling unit impact looks like, the statute requires that credits be provided for any other funding sources that the district will apply to fund the intended capacity project. So for the school district, this could be dollars that they expect to receive through the state school construction assistant program. There is an eligibility criteria that the district looks to see whether or not they will be eligible when they build the project. And then the second credit that's applied is anticipated taxes that the new homeowner will pay towards the bond or capital levy that will also be used to fund that project. So again, that's that, just reiterating, impact fees cannot be the sole source of funding. Once those credits are applied, you get to a final unfunded need. The Snohomish County Ordinance requires that that unfunded need be discounted or adjusted downward by 50%, 50. That 50% discount factor is fairly common in many jurisdictions throughout the state in terms of how local jurisdictions look at impact fees. And some jurisdictions will actually have a higher adjustment, some will have a lower. But in any case, what is important is that there is some adjustment that should be made to any calculated impact fee because you're using averages in the formula in order to get to that one size fits all fee. And you want to maintain the integrity of the fee so that it's not vulnerable to fee challenges or otherwise undermines the fee program. So with that in mind, what I've done here is a very simplified example. I want to emphasize where you see the yellow highlighted 2211, that is not the school district's current school impact fee. This is purely an example. What it reflects is the cost for new elementary space within the school district based upon the 2020 capital facilities plan. So a little bit of old information, but helpful for the example. So the district has identified a plan. Well, they have first identified growth-related capacity needs at the elementary school. They have identified a plan through construction in the future of a new elementary school, plus additions at existing schools for a total of 900 new seats at the cost of $37 million. We first, through the formula, identify what is the cost per student to build that. And you see that's where we get that just over $41,000 figure. Then, in order to identify the proportionate share per dwelling unit as consistent with the statute, we multiply that cost per student by the student generation rate. And in this district, the current 2020 student generation rate for K-5 students is 0.211. That is on average how many new K-5 students are living in new single-family homes built in the district. When we apply that, we get to that cost per house, which is $8,674. So that is the impact per home to provide a new seat for growth. We're not done. As you remember, the statute requires us to provide credits for any other funding the district expects to receive towards that new elementary school capacity. So Sultan School District expects that it will get state funding for that project. So we deduct that share based upon the student generation rate. And then we also deduct future taxes that a new homeowner would also be paying towards that same new elementary school capacity. That gets us to the calculated fee of just over $4,400. And then pursuant to the ordinance, that is adjusted down by 50% to get to that final fee of $2,200. Again, not the district's current fee, but just using an example based upon just isolating K-5 capacity projects alone. There's some specific factors that I wanted to just go over with regard to Sultan School District, and just in terms of where the district has been in the past few years, where the current 2020 fee is, and then we'll also talk a little bit about what is happening right now, which is an update to that capital facilities plan and a new fee that will be adopted later in 2022. So the district is required to update its capital facilities plan every 2 years and present that updated plan and any impact fees it is requesting to both the cities that it is in and also to Snohomish County. The district has, over the past several years, on 2 different occasions, considered a mid-cycle update. So that is requesting in the off year of an update that the city and the county think about updating the fees to address changing circumstances within the district. So not wanting to wait and lose time. We did one in 2017 when enrollment started to increase, and that fee at that time increased from what was adopted in 2016. We looked at it this year, and I'll talk about that a little bit more, but there was not a significant change in factors that would have justified moving forward with that mid-cycle update. One of the things that happened with the district between 2010 and 2015 is that the district's enrollment declined at certain grade levels and had some variation with some increases in some years. But the ultimate end result was that if you think back to the slide where I talked about the 3 prongs of eligibility, during those years of declining enrollment, the district could not demonstrate growth. And because it could not demonstrate growth, it could not demonstrate growth-related needs, and therefore was not eligible to request impact fees. In the years where there was some growth happening at some of the grade levels, we looked at whether that would actually justify a growth-related need. And at that time, there was adequate existing permanent capacity, even with that growth in mind. So again, not eligible to request impact fees. 2016, things started to change. Growth was happening. The district saw that there was going to be, by 2021, a need for new capacity related to that growth. And so in 2016, we prepared the capital facilities plan and identified the need for impact fees. In 2017, we did another look. And again, this was out of the cycle, but wanting to really be, the district wanting to be very certain that they were going to keep pace with growth and be able to make adjustments as needed out of the cycle. We went in for that interim capital facilities update, identified additional growth-related projects, and had an increased impact fee adopted by the jurisdictions. 2020, same thing happening, more growth occurring. And at that time, the district identified, in addition to the elementary addition projects, the middle school addition project, and the high school addition project, they also wanted to start planning for a new elementary school. And that was all going to be based upon growth occurring in the forward-looking 6-year period. That resulted in yet another increase to the school impact fee, and what it currently is at that 2,966 per single family unit. So I think what this underscores is that this is always an ongoing process. And what I have, in working with district administration, observed is there is a constant relook, even outside of the normal process that both the city and the county have in place. I'm going to once again have you keep in mind that there is never an apples to apples comparison with impact fees. Every district has different factors, different circumstances that drive what their fees are. But one of the things that is particularly important to help explain where the Sultan School District's fee is that student generation rate. And keep in mind that that student generation rate drives the proportionate share and ultimately identifies the underlying fee, the cost per dwelling unit. So for Sultan School District, the total K-12 student generation rate is 0.334. The multifamily housing rate that is used in the district's capital facilities plan is based upon a countywide average. And that's because there hasn't been a good, robust amount of multifamily units built within the district. So we look to other districts for a sense of what to expect from multifamily units. But importantly, that single family student generation rate, when you compare it to your neighboring districts, and you'll see it in this chart, it is on the low end at all 3 grade levels. It has been increasing in recent years, and we fully expect that as more new homes come online and are occupied, it's probably going to increase again. And that's one of the reasons why we want to keep a close watch, why we want to keep updating these student generation rates so that the district can be nimble and if necessary, request one of those out of cycle updates. But here, I think you'll just see some of the stark differences in terms of how many students are residing in new homes in different districts, and see how that generally relates to the impact fees that are in place in those districts. And again, not an apples to apples comparison, but very simply, if we were to use in Sultan School District, the current Mukilteo School District student generation rates and applied those to Sultan School District projects in the Sultan School District Capital Facilities Plan, you would see that the fee would nearly double. And that's because there are nearly twice as many students coming out of new homes built within Mukil School District than there are out of Sultan School Districts. And this is simply a function of demographics. It is not something that never changes. I've seen throughout different districts in different regions how those student generation rates really can vary as more new development comes online or as homes turn over. And so again, one of the reasons why we update regularly and very carefully watch this. So 2022 update is currently in process. We're at the very beginning of that process. We'll be updating the student enrollment projections, and those always incorporate current development data within the district. One of the things that every school district is having to do is think about how the pandemic has affected enrollment, current enrollment, how it will affect enrollment going forward, and when to think about when we might see that post-pandemic bounce back. Even with that, preliminary numbers that I have seen from your district still anticipate growth at all 3 grade levels, probably not a surprise to anyone. We'll also update the student generation rates and have had a preliminary look by the outside consultant that does this work. We are seeing some modest increases over the 2020 rates. So that is demonstrating that there are more students residing in those new homes. We'll continue to watch that, and as necessary, do an interim update if we're really seeing a sharp increase in uptick, because that would affect the underlying impact fee. District staff will reassess the planned capacity projects, look at whether there needs to be updated cost projections included in the formula. We'll confirm whether and state match will be received for those projects. If it's not confirmed with eligibility, we won't include that in the formula. And then we'll update the anticipated tax credit based upon current data. All of that will result in an updated capital facilities plan document that will be reviewed by the board likely early summer. That it will include an updated impact fee, which will be presented then to Snohomish County and the city of Sultan in the fall of 2022. So that is my presentation. Happy to answer any questions that may arise. Dan, it looks like you're still on mute if you're talking.
Yep, there we go. Why don't we have each of the attendees raise their hand, and we'll let them go one at a time asking questions, and they can just do it verbally. And we'll let Denise start with the answer. It may involve one of us, but likely she's the one to answer the questions. I think, Denise, one of the big ones is, that I want to ask is, have we lost out on hundreds of homes impact fees? Because that's come up a lot.
I would say no. You have had impact fees in place since 2016. You, of course, had them prior to 2010. But since the time that you have been eligible to collect school impact fees, you have had the fees in place. And looking back on your development data, I believe that 2016 period was right around the time that you saw new homes coming in.
I think there were some homes built during the 10 to 15 window, but we're declining in enrollment.
Yeah, and that is the challenge. And if that were the case, and I trust you that that is the case, there were new homes happening, but you weren't eligible. You had the space in your existing schools to be able to serve the students from those new homes.
Okay, I'll stop. Let's let others, and then I've got some questions, once there's another break in it. Anybody in the audience have a question?
Jeff asked a question if the slideshow can be made available, and I let him know that we are recording it and then we'll put it up on our website.
Any other questions from anybody? So let me, Dan, just explain, Ballard, what you do. The process here used to be where developers would go to the city and they would work out all of the exchange of money there. The ordinance changed to where they have to come to us now, and they can't get a building permit until they show them a receipt of payments, is my understanding of how it works.
Yeah, that is correct. So, we, as Denise kind of touched on, we collect impact fees from City of Gold Bar, City of Sultan, and then from unincorporated Snohomish County that resides within our district boundaries. Snohomish County makes those collections directly, but we take in the proceeds for impact fees at the district office for Gold Bar and Sultan projects. And then they take those, my understanding, they take those receipts to the city hall in those jurisdictions and get that as part of their permit process.
Question about comparison, and I think you kind of answered this, but maybe, I don't know if you work on North Shore's plan or if they have all in-house people doing it, but if you could, kind of make a comparison there of, how their $425 million bond and all this other stuff comes into play to impact that significantly high impact fee.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do, in fact, work on their capital facilities plan. And so I'm very familiar with it and the different circumstances of their district. So several things that distinguish them from your district. Obviously, they are a much bigger district. They have had growth occurring for a number of years at around 400 to 500 new students coming into the district every year. It has started to decline a bit in the last couple of years, but they continue to see needs. They have comprehensive projects at all 3 grade levels. So a new elementary school, a new middle school, a new high school. And that's compared to, for your district, you have a new elementary school, but you also have at the middle and the high school level addition projects. Addition projects are significantly more cost effective to build than a new comprehensive school. It's just a lot more money to build a new comprehensive school. So that in itself is one difference. The other difference for North Shore from your district is that in addition to just the construction cost, they also needed to add in land costs at each of those grade levels to build those new comprehensive schools. And in their district boundaries, they have found land is difficult to find and land is very expensive. So the land costs themselves add a lot to the underlying fee. They also have had, and I know this from working with them, significant site development costs on some of their new schools, which increase the school construction costs, increase the underlying bond costs. So it is more expensive to build a seat in their district just based upon their site development costs than it would be in your district, depending on the site. But obviously your addition projects, you know your sites well, and have thought through that in your school construction estimates. The other contributing factor is they have very high student generation rates at all 3 grade levels. So they have a higher cost per student just based on that alone. In other words, if we were to apply their student generation rates to your capital projects, you would see a much higher fee. Additional factor, they are not eligible for state school construction assistance at most of their grade levels. I believe they do get a little bit at the high school level, but they do not get that at the elementary and the middle school level. So they don't have a credit to offset some of that cost per dwelling unit. And then they also have a different tax credit rate that, again, is different from what you're looking at. And a lot of that is driven by that large bond measure that's sitting out there. So all of those things combined create a very different set of circumstances from the Sultan School District. So
they can't get matching money. Is that because of a low poverty rate, or what is the reason for that?
No, it's because of the state formula, which really is one that doesn't necessarily look at the realistic needs of school districts. I don't think I am saying something that will surprise anyone who knows about that formula in general. It provides an eligibility standard, and for school districts to become eligible, you have to demonstrate that you are not overbuilt, quote unquote, overbuilt based upon a formula adopted by the state. And there are different things, including things like covered walkways that are counted within your square footage as being space available for students. So it is not a realistic formula in many ways. And for North Shore, if they were to follow the formula, when they follow the formula, it is shown, despite the fact that they have significant growth needs, that they are overbuilt at 2 of their grade levels and thus not eligible for funding.
Complicated.
Yeah, it's I want to definitely emphasize, I really simplified that explanation, but that essentially is it in a nutshell.
Under our current circumstances, are there any other questions? Cassie, does anybody have their hand up? No. We're just embarking on a new, an update to our plan. Is there anything we can incorporate in our plan differently that's within the parameters of doing this above board that would, make sure that we maximize what we can collect, even if we, my perception has always been the challenges with a small school district like ours is that we go through this growth, but because it hasn't been constant over 10 or 15 years, we only see it out of a year or two of the 6 years. And by the time we get to the end of the building, we're starting to see it, the building slows down. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but that's been my perception of one of the limitations of a school district our size.
Yeah, and I think, let me answer that part and then I'll go back. But I think one thing that is certainly true is that while the impact fee system is a helpful one and much more efficient than what was in place previously, it is an imperfect system because of what you just talked through, that it is looking at growth through a narrow window to determine eligibility. And that is just a function of how it works. And so it may not be adequately capturing growth over a period of time. We certainly try to stay in front of that by doing regular updates, but it's never going to be the perfect filling out the entire pie. And it's just a limitation that is built into that system. That said, it is a efficient and predictable system for ensuring that every new building permit before it is issued has paid a fee that reflects the growth related costs at that point in time. For purposes of the 2022 plan and what the district can do to make sure that it is capturing all of its growth related needs and thinking forward through that 6-year planning period, I think one of the things that we'll want to focus on is the projects that you had in the 2020 plan as growth related capacity projects and whether those are still the intended projects. I think they are. And I know by looking at your enrollment numbers, your preliminary projections, that you're still showing growth at all 3 grade levels through that 6-year planning period and needs for new capacity. So when looking at those planned projects, what we'll want to do is we'll want to really drill down on anticipated construction costs. Certainly in the last couple of years, there's been some inflation to all types of construction, but certainly to school construction. So we'll want to look at that and see if we need to update those cost projections. They were certainly provided in 2020 with anticipated escalation going forward to the time they were built. So it's just making sure we're still tracking that correctly. I think the other thing that we'll want to really confirm is the existence of state funding in the future at the time that those are built. And I don't mean that the dollars are going to be there, but that the district will still be eligible for those dollars. And at what level will the district be eligible? Because if, for example, we identify in 2020, the district was eligible for state match at the high school level, but now going forward into 2022 and beyond, it doesn't look like that's going to be available, then we shouldn't include that credit against the fee. So we want to really look at that and do it in a way where we're confident one way or the other. So those are the things that we'll really want to drill down in order to make sure that the fee as calculated in the 2022 capital facilities plan best reflects current growth related costs.
Yeah. How can we best influence? It seems like the rules around this and the laws are not really built for a system our size. How can we influence that? Because I think the perception, and I even, to a certain degree agree with some of this, is that builders come in, they build a whole swath of houses, they leave with a ton of money, and then it's really on the citizens to figure out where to house all those students. There's been a little offset, but nothing to really make a remarkable difference in the cost of a school. What could we do to influence that so that, I think they moved the expenditure from 6 years to 10 a while ago.
Correct.
But still, when you do a project every 20 or 30 years, it just doesn't really do much for you.
Yeah, it really, you're absolutely right. A school district of your size in terms of the utilization and the effectiveness of impact fees is very different from a school district of North Shore size, where they're getting several $1 million a year in impact fees. even if their fee was not at the level it was, they probably still would be getting that just because they have so much development occurring all at once. You have a lot of development occurring all at once, but it's just a relatively smaller pool. And so while you're getting fees from all of those units, they don't add up in the way that they do in a larger district with more development. One of the things that is always something to think about is the adjustment factor that is applied to the impact fee. And as we know, by ordinance, Snohomish County has a 50% adjustment factor, one that is typical in many jurisdictions. But, you know, there is a thought that perhaps your city wants to look at something different. That would be one thing to think about. There needs to be, and I will emphasize this once again, you do need to have an adjustment factor because you want to maintain the integrity of that one size fits all fee. And because you're using averages and estimates in your formula, you need to have some cushion so that it applies evenly for all development. Beyond that, I would say to the extent there is a very large, and I don't know if you've had any of these or if any are planned, but a very large subdivision of some kind, there still is the SEPA process available for reviewing impacts to schools or other public facilities. You have to, of course, be involved early in the process and be able to demonstrate how this one large development and how it's going to be brought online will impact the districts differently from 2 houses being built in one place, 3 houses being built in another. But I always want school districts to remember that the SEPA process is still there. It would be effectively an alternative to school impact fees, but it would involve some more work and study.
Yeah. Question about portables and how they play into our square footage of serving students. You know, if you removed all the portables, and we have a ton of them, we certainly wouldn't have room in our schools for all of our kids. And so do they count as, or how does this all view, this whole process view portables on campuses? Because that's really what we've done to solve our problems, is continue to add portables.
Right. And you're absolutely not alone. Portables are a given in most school districts, but definitely in growth districts. They are an interim capacity solution. I think most districts have a general standard that they at some point would like to either start to reduce those portables or get rid of them altogether. That is always the goal. With portables, a couple of things. One of the, and this goes back to thinking about eligibility for state funding. Portables are helpful for purposes of demonstrating that you have unhoused students as determined under the state eligibility rules. They're not going to give you money unless you show them after that you have students that are unhoused. It's a little bit, a little irritating because for many districts to be able to qualify for state funding, they have to be in a position where many of their students are in portables, and no district wants to be there, but that's how the state system is built. For purposes of how we look at portables in your capital facilities plan and how they affect your impact fees, the simplest way for me to say it is they don't affect your impact fees because we are looking at what your capacity needs are based upon your existing permanent capacity. So your brick and mortar buildings. The portables help us demonstrate that you have that interim capacity solution while you are preparing and planning for the additional permanent capacity. So, but the fact that you have portables alone does not make you ineligible to collect school impact fees or to seek school impact fees.
Okay, so ordinances at the city level, the county level, they are all, does one city ordinance around impact fees differ much from another? Are they all built around the WACs and RCWs that you mentioned earlier?
They are all very similar. Yeah, they are all designed to, comply with the state law. The only differences that you might see from one jurisdiction to the next really is with regard to that adjustment factor.
Okay. All right. Anybody else have any questions? And if some, share the mic if somebody in the any of the attendees want to ask a question, live, just let them go ahead and do that. I'm not sure that I have any more. Is there anything, Denise, as we close this up, that you think might, assist with all of us? This is complicated stuff. And it's one of the reasons why we use you as a lawyer and a consultant, is because, I don't have an expertise in this, but over time I've learned a lot of the basics on how it works. And I think Dan and Charlie probably are the same. But is there anything that you can suggest to us or the community we've got some attendees that are in the community that might help with this whole process?
I think that it absolutely is. It is complicated, and it is, but there are several kind of baseline points that are helpful to keep in mind. And I think in most cases, the most important thing is to remember that the student generation rate, or the average number of students generated from new homes built in the district, really is a significant driver of the ultimate impact fee. And where you have a lower student generation rate, which your district does, for whatever reason, there just are fewer children living in new homes in your district than there are in the Mukilteo School District. When that's the case, your per dwelling unit impact is just going to be lower. Doesn't mean it's always going to be that way. And that's why we always relook at that. And as that student generation rate starts to creep up, fees will creep up. And I think that is one of the most important things that I would suggest keeping in mind for anyone thinking about school impact fees, thinking about what per dwelling unit impacts are. And, well, again, I'll say it's never an apples to apples comparison, but when you're looking at another district, the demographics and those student generation rates are really going to be an important component.
Mm-hmm. So I since we don't have any questions that did any come in the chat box or the Q&A?
Nope.
Okay, so we'll just get this prepared. We'll make sure that the slideshow is available to anybody that wants it. We'll email it to you or whatever. And this will be available to watch or share with whoever you want. It'll be on the front of our website. And we'll, hopefully we'll figure out a prominent place to put it so that it's available, and we'll just put it in our library of things that we use to assist with helping people understand why we're doing what we're doing and what the laws are that we're trying to follow. So I know, if we didn't have your assistance, Denise, or somebody with your expertise, we would have a hard time. This is a big deal, and it's complicated. I still don't feel like it's as friendly to small school districts as it needs to be, but I'm not sure what to do about that, because, you mentioned something in North Shore where they've got these ongoing projects that year after year after year. That's not been my experience in 15 years. We have some, but, again, they don't generate 100 new kids every year. And just, I don't know how we get beyond that stuff. So, Dan Ballard, you have anything? Is Dan frozen, or is he?
I think his screen froze.
Frozen.
Okay. Charlie, do you have any questions?
I don't. I feel pretty confident in my role in building the plan, and my interactions with Denise has educated me considerably over the years. So
we'll just probably, Charlie, utilize you to help us provide updates to the community as we go on in this process. And just a quick question, Denise, at what point in this will we take another student generation look? Because they're building houses fast.
Yeah, we looked in the late fall of 2021, and we certainly could have not a full updated report, but another look at that just to see if there has been any change since that time. But what I would recommend, but I don't anticipate that you would see a significant change. But what I would recommend you do is, as we get more towards late spring, early summer, perhaps do another look at that point. Because, even if we have the 2022 update in progress, we can make an adjustment as needed still at that time before your board adopts. And then that wouldn't be the last time I would advise you to look. I think another look in the fall or early 2023 would be appropriate. So if needed, we can go in and do one of those mid-cycle interim updates.
So this current process that we're in, if there was an increase in the fee, it would go into place January of 2023, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
And that's why we took an interim look, because we don't want to miss out on what's there. So we'll keep looking, and hopefully that is helpful to people.
Yeah.
So Cassie, this is something we can post tomorrow on the website?
Yep, I'll get it up on it tomorrow.
Thank you. So thanks, Charlie and Dan, and thank you, Denise, and thanks for everybody that attended. If something comes to mind, for those in the audience tonight or tomorrow or the next day, just send an email out. We want to answer your questions on this. This is a process that is challenging and complicated, and want everybody to understand the best what we're able to help. How we're working through it and how we're addressing each of the issues.
Jeff does have a question about the generation rate.
Mhm.
Okay. Go ahead and mic him up. You're on mute, Jeff.
All right, can you hear me now?
There you go.
Okay, it was more of a comment. I just was in relation to the generation rate, the 0.211 to, and then I think later in the slideshow, yeah, I saw a 0.334 rate. Is that the rate for people moving into the new homes being built up on the basin? That just seems like a real low figure for number of kids.
So the 0.211 is the K5, and this is from the 2020 capital facilities plan. So keep in mind, this is being updated right now, but the 0.211 is K5 only. And then the 0.334 is K12. So that is the total across all grade levels. I don't disagree with you that in looking at either of those numbers, that you just feel like it should be more, which is one of the reasons, again, why we update. And it is starting to edge up, but it's still not significantly more. It's just not looking like other districts. But they are real numbers based upon recent new development in the district.
Sorry, Jeff, quick question, Denise. Do they look at every house, or they take a sample of them?
They look at so they essentially do a 5-year look back. And they look at every new building permit that has been pulled and homes occupied within that 5-year period, and they match it directly with your student addresses.
And so our problem is we've only had growth really for the last year and a half.
Yeah.
There's 3.5 years where it was a house here, a house there. Is that accurate, or?
I think that's a good way to look at it. There's been, I just want to pull the study just to see how many dwelling units were identified. Looks like they identified 513 housing units, single family, constructed within the last 5-year period. And in those, and this is again simplified, in those 513 new dwelling units, there were just over 200 students residing in those units. K-12 students.
Do they give a year-by-year number? How many came
No,
on?
it's just an aggregate, but we certainly could ask the consultant for what it was year by year.
Huh.
So that's starting in 2017 through the end of 2021.
Gotcha. Okay. Go ahead, Jeff. I won't talk anymore. Sorry about that.
Oh, no, and I appreciate your answer, Denise. It just, yeah, looking at that number, it just seems, there's no kids for, every, 2 to 5 houses. So it just seems like a, unrealistically low number, especially when you consider many households have more than one child.
Yeah, and I think, Jeff, one thing that your comment makes me think of, just to clarify, and again, this is part of the imperfection in the system, is that some of those homes may very well have a 3-year-old who is not enrolled in the school district, but in 2 years will be. And because of the way that the impact of new development is looked at, that 3-year-old isn't captured.
That is a very good point. I guess I am going to talk again. One of the things I mentioned to the board in my last update to them is when I walk through those neighborhoods, there are little trikes and signs of very young kids all over the place. School age, I can't tell as much.
Yeah, and it's, again, an imperfect system, and it also, once again, reemphasize why it's really important to keep relooking and updating every year, so that you are capturing school age students appropriately.
Thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions? Okay, so I just want to thank everybody again. We're going to keep you up to date. This is an important process. As I said before, complicated. If something comes to mind tonight, tomorrow, next few days, whatever, you can always reach out. And if I don't have the answer, I will get the answer. I'll talk to Charlie, Dan Ballard, or Denise, and we'll get an answer for you. So just another piece of trying to understand how all this works. And Cassie will have this posted on the website tomorrow, and we will make available for any requests that you want the slideshow. That'll be available as well. So I really appreciate it, Denise, and looking forward to doing one of these in person soon. This is best we have right now, but thank you very much for all of your help on this.
Absolutely. Happy to do it.
Yeah, thanks, Denise.
Mhm.
Thanks, Denise.
All right, so that's all I have.